Hi guys, this is my review for Season 9, Episode 16, Psych Out. So to start out, the B story for this episode was Tony's issues with getting paid less than Mickey. This was an okay plot, mostly due to the exchange between Tony and Dr. Ryan about his inadequacy issues. That was a particularly charming scene, but in the end of this episode, Tony ended up screwed. I mean, with his luck, you think by now Tony would have learned to leave well enough alone, but I guess not. So anyway, the actual case file for this episode was good. I found it a little hard to follow, probably because, when I'm watching NCIS, I'm thinking about everything else besides the case. But it was an interesting case, I guess. Yeah. I love how the team had to go old school again, not as far as Power Down, but it was still pretty good. I love Mickey. He's like, paper? And then later his phone goes off and everyone just death glares him. I only left my phone on to monitor Banks' calls and my Tumblr dash. Cat gifs. I really like the return of Dr. Rachel Cranston in this episode, otherwise known as Dr. Kate's sister. I read a comment somewhere about this episode that complained that she was a bit underused. I partially agree, she didn't really have a super important role, but she's a character I kind of hope ends up being a bit like Fornell. And she shows up every once in a while, a few times a season, not always in a pivotal role. That's okay with me. Personally, I'd like her to recur. I also like Cranston versus Ryan. Is lactose intolerance really a fad? Cause that's one bandwagon I'm not getting on. Love me some dairy. So I think the overall most noteworthy aspect of this episode was Dr. Ryan. Overall, I loved her. I love how Dr. Ryan starts out all cocky and poised. And I'm pretty sure if she ever interrogated me, it'd be like 5 minutes before I started crying and confessing to terrorism or file sharing or something. And as this episode goes on, she pushes, and she pushes the Gibbs. And Gibbs, he doesn't so much as push back as take a giant sledgehammer to her sense of security. Don't mess with Gibbs. And then we get to see Dr. Ryan unravel, and we get to see her human side. And Gibbs played hardball, but he never really threw a kid under the bus, and everything works out. I think she really could have been a character that I hated right off the bat, but I didn't. Probably because 1, I was looking forward to her, and 2, Jamie Lee Curtis is just too gosh darn awesome. I'm so excited to have more Ryan. I think she's in at least one other episode, not 100% sure which one, but I think it's The Tell, episode 18. Anyway, looking forward to it. So to be honest, I really like this episode, but I found it really hard to review. I watched this episode like 4 times, and every time I sat down to work out a review, my brain became this giant vacuum void of all cleverness. I mean, it was a good episode. It wasn't boring. It was just one of those episodes where it's not particularly heart-stoppingly great, but not particularly horribly bad. It's somewhere comfortably in the middle. But really, this episode was pretty good. It had a lot of good elements, and I loved Dr. Ryan, so I'm going to give this episode 4 calf pows out of a possible 5 calf pows. One final thought, why is Gibbs building a rocking chair in his basement? Was he always building that, or is that just there since his, alternative reality experience? Because since the diner hallucination, he's been all happy in matchmaking. But then he goes home and makes a rocking chair for Tony and Kate's non-existent baby? Am I reading too much into this? Maybe? Necessarily a pivotal. He's not always in a pivotal. He's not always in a pivotal. He's not always in a not always in a pivotal. Not always in a pivotal. Not always in a pivotal role.